I have questions about the Ukraine and Russia war that's happening right now because whenever I see something that is a unanimous decision, meaning all the media outlets are all agreeing that Ukraine is the one that we should support, I look at that and I say, I'm skeptical, right? Now, it might be as simple as it is. I heard Kamala Harris say, someone asked her to break down the conflict, and she said, well, basically, Russia and Ukraine are in countries in Europe, and you've got a big country, Russia, who invaded a small country, Ukraine, and that's bad. Now, I wish it were that simple. I don't know the details of what is all going on. Again, I have more questions than I have answers. But and maybe it is that simple. Maybe it is just a big country invading a small country. But I always look at situations when there's a unanimous decision, when you have all these people, like I forget, was it Stephen King, the writer, came out with like a Ukraine t-shirt. It's like, why does Stephen King give a shit about Ukraine? Why are so many people coming out and supporting Ukraine when most people don't even know where the hell Ukraine is on a map? Case in point, I was driving one of my clients' sons, and he's my client as well, to practice. And we were talking about stuff, and he said, I want to fight for Ukraine. And I almost crashed the car because I'm like, what are you talking about? You want to fight for Ukraine? You're 15 years old. And I said, do you even know where Ukraine is on the map? And I said, explain it to me, describe where it is. And he couldn't describe it exactly where it was. He didn't know. He thought it doesn't share a border with Russia. Okay, so he doesn't even know where it is, but yet, again, this propaganda machine, and again, it could be right. The propaganda machine could be exactly right. It could be as simple as they make it out to be. But again, my skepticism comes in whenever I see a unanimous decision. We had a unanimous decision recently, and that one is also very, very interesting. And again, I was skeptical, still skeptical. But with this one, when I hear things like that and nobody really even knows anything about Ukraine, they don't know if they're good or bad, or they don't know anyone from there. I asked the same kid, name 3 people from the Ukraine. Meanwhile, I know tons of people from the Ukraine, not people personally, but there's boxers, Vasily Lomachenko, Alexander Usyk, there's soccer players, there's all these people that I know and I'm familiar with Ukraine. But yet kids and most people, they don't know and they don't care. But yet all of a sudden we have all this energy. I'm driving down the street where I live. I live in California, and there's Ukrainian flags over overpasses. I'm going, okay, well, why is there all this support? Now, it might be 100% justified. There might be, again, the perfect reason to support them because they're the ones being taken advantage of. But when I look at the propaganda machine and they don't do anything on accident, how many wars are going on right now between similar sorts of situations where there's a bigger, more powerful nation that is warring a smaller nation, or a nation that's taking advantage of their own people within that nation? The powerful are taking advantage of the poor, or taking advantage of certain ethnic groups or religious groups. Know about those conflicts as well. We know about these things that are going on, and we don't care about those. There's no propaganda, there's no media message behind it. Now, propaganda might be a strong word, but what else are we going to call it? And it might be justified. It might be good propaganda in that sense, but it's still a message delivered with a purpose to get you to think a certain way. So whenever I look at things like this, I always say, what's going on, right? Why is there not balance when Republicans and Democrats all agree on things, when all the news stations agree, when every other country also agrees with what's going on? I get skeptical. And so I have questions, right? And the reason why I get skeptical about things like that with unanimous decisions is because I understand how relationships work. When someone says, hey, in this relationship, it was all that person's fault, right? Let's just talk about like an intimate relationship with a couple. I always get, again, very skeptical because I know how relationships work. When there's sayings like it takes 2 to tango, that's a cliche, but it sticks around. These cliches stick around because there are some truths to them. And when you're talking about it takes 2 to tango, If you're in a relationship and you have two people, that's the relationship. It's not one person and the other person is just like, just happens to be there around this other person. No, there's a interaction, there's a relationship between the two people. What is that relationship? How did that relationship start? How did the relationship go sour? Yes, there might be someone who's more at fault than the other person, but is it 90% that person's fault and 10% the other person's fault? There's still 10% on the other end. Is it 50-50? Is it 60-40? So again, when I see a unanimous decision, when someone says it's all that person's fault, I'm sympathetic and I say it probably is, right? Especially if they describe to me some of the things that went on and I go, yeah, that makes sense, right? That person is crazy or that person is really mean or abusive or whatever it might be. But I also think what could have been the reasoning behind their behavior, because people don't just do things for no reason. Sometimes they do, yes, but almost 100% of the time, there's a reason behind it. And it could be a very small reason. Like I said, it could be 90-10. It could be there's 10% of what's going on was someone else's fault, but the mass majority was this other person acting out or being crazy or overreacting or whatever it might be. But there was still 10%. Well, maybe it's 5%. Well, maybe it's 1%. But there's very, very few 100% in life. Again, that's my belief, but when I look around the world, when I analyze relationships with myself, with other people, with conflicts, okay, let's talk about a big country invading a small country. Why is it that when Russia invades a small country like Ukraine, it's all on Russia's fault? Putin's a crazy dictator. That's our story. But then when the United States does it, there's no problem. We look at that and the small country is the threat. We did that in Iraq. We said that this was because of X, Y, and Z reason. Lo and behold, it wasn't those reasons. Big country invades small country. Everyone's on one side. Now it's starting to get more muddy as more information comes out. I'm not saying that that's not the situation. I'm not saying that Iraq wasn't dangerous at the time, but to say that it's a 100% unanimous decision, we found out it wasn't. We ended up realizing pretty quickly, into the war with Iraq, that really we shouldn't be there. And we could look at this with Iraq, we could look at this with Afghanistan, we could look at this with Libya. I mean, the list goes on and on for us doing that. But now when we have another nation doing that, we have to butt our face in and say, this is wrong, this is bad. We need to support the little guy. And again, it might be justified. I don't know. I don't think you know. I don't think anybody really knows. Definitely not these news organizations. The only people who really know what's going on are at the very top. So again, I'm not saying that you have to be critical. I'm critical on my own. I like to ask questions. I like to think about things. But when I hear things like a 15-year-old saying, I want to go fight for Ukraine, and he doesn't even know where it is on a map, doesn't know one person from there, doesn't know anybody in relationship to Ukraine. Also with Russia, he doesn't know anything about Russia either. That to me is concerning. And again, I fear that we're going to be dragged into this on some level. Europe is going to be dragged into this on some level, and this is going to create a bigger problem. I said in my previous video that I think that this is just the beginning of a much larger conflict that is going to spread. There's going to be other conflicts, whether that's with Russia or whether that's with other nations, whether that's with the United States, with us, that's where I'm from, that's where I live, or whether that's with European nations or with Asian nations. I don't know. I couldn't tell you, but I have that feeling. And again, when I see something like this, that unanimous decision where everyone is on the same side, agreeing that this person's right and that person's wrong, when I just never see that as so easy. Things, especially with politics and nations and money and oil and bombs and bullets and nukes and all these crazy things, it gets very, very complicated. And especially now with this crisis that we've been going on for the last 2 years, it makes things even more heated. Even more is at stake because countries are desperate, people are desperate. And when, what do they say? Desperate times call for desperate measures. That's what I feel like is happening. And who knows where this could end up. So, when you're watching things, when you're listening to things, like I said, I love feedback. I love people to comment. I want to know what you're thinking, and does this all make sense to you? Is it as simple as they're making it out to be? Or do you happen to know someone who's living in Ukraine or living in Russia, or again on the border? Because there's a lot of people who basically speak Russian that live in the Ukraine, and almost consider themselves Russians towards that border. What is that interaction like? What is it like? There was a coup in 2014 in the Ukraine, right, where there was people who wanted to overthrow the government, and successfully they got the president kicked out. Where did he go? He went to Russia. So what all is going on? And again, why is it that we, as the rest of the world, are all siding with one nation? Now, again, more communist nation, more dictatorial nation like Russia, should we side with them? I don't think so. I don't think that we should side with either or. I think that we should look at this and say, what is really going on, and analyze it from a more neutral perspective. But again, I'd love to know, is it that simple? Or is there more going on? I have a lot more questions than I have answers, but that's my thinking. That's what's getting me more and more skeptical about what's going on. And again, I'd love your feedback and see what you're thinking so that we can try to work this out, because really the only people that know exactly what's going on are the people at the very, very top, whether that's the people in Russia, like Putin, or the people in the Ukraine at that top level who are making the decisions and understand what the relationship is like between the two and why it's going sour and why Russia is invading. So that's my video for today. Until next time, thank you.